Picture this. You're 8 years old, sitting on the floor of your living room, popsicle in hand, listening to a monk discuss the ethics of homicide. In a past generation, this monk's people were utterly massacred in an act of genocide. These are words one can use to describe Avatar: The Last Airbender. Genocide, homicide, ethics. Without knowing any better, one might be shocked to find out that Avatar is a kid's show. So, like everyone else on the internet lately, I am obsessed with Avatar. I rewatched the entire series in less than a week, which is a really crazy binge for me. As the finale drew closer and closer, each episode made me more and more emotional. By the final episode, I was crying at the title screen. Now, anyone who knows me will tell you that I get really emotional about good storytelling. That's nothing new. But something about Avatar hits different. I can't stop thinking about the show. I'm learning a song from it on piano, and I bought a kalimba for the sole reason that the final song of the show is played on one. My time with the series felt special this time around. But to understand the personal impact as well as the cultural impact this show had, we have to go back to 2008. I can still picture exactly where I was the first time I watched the series finale. I was, like I said, on the floor, with a popsicle, probably crying, young enough to be terrified that Azula was real, yet old enough to keep quiet about my fear. Seriously though, Azula is downright insane. But that's not the only memory I have of The Last Airbender. I grew up without a TV, so I had to get my cartoons in on grandparents' time. Nickelodeon used to do Avatar marathons late at night, so obviously I stayed up for them. Back then, I didn't think about character arcs, I didn't think about the ethics of a TV show or anything like that. I just wanted to waterbend so badly that I used to sit in my pool and splash around madly, feeling like the most powerful warrior in the Southern Water Tribe. Looking back, I can see why I'm an airbender. I probably looked more like the swamp monster than Katara. I didn't know what made the show good, but I knew it was good. I wasn't alone. That's what gave the series airtime, launched a live-action movie that we are never ever going to talk about, and even the sequel series Legend of Korra. Here's a side note, I have never watched Korra, but I am so excited to. Although I told myself that I can't start the show until I get this video posted, and that's just incentive motivation. I remembered Avatar for years, even though I barely watched it all for a decade. I caught the occasional rerun in middle school, but without owning the series on DVD, it just wasn't an option. I still remembered the show fondly, and I knew the plot well enough to talk about it with any other fans. The box set on Blu-ray is sitting in my wishlist to this day, actually. I wanted to rewatch Avatar, but it just wasn't a priority. You know, life was happening. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation put all 3 seasons on Netflix? What? Okay, at first I didn't do anything. I was busy, life happens, blah blah blah. I had the memories of Avatar from childhood, and even though I wanted to rewatch it, just reminiscing on it was enough. But recently, my life has been changing. I went through a breakup and I started a semester of fully online classes. An overwhelming majority of days I don't even leave the house now, and seeing friends is as difficult to coordinate as a Fire Nation invasion during an eclipse. Now, this is nothing new in our current society. The Rona really wrecked all of us, we know that. But these are important things to consider when answering the question, why is Avatar so impactful? I could talk about how the show is just good at face value. I want to talk about why it's so good right now specifically, but let's take a little time to discuss why it's so good at any time. The show begins with a winning concept, an Asiatic-inspired world split into 4 distinct groups. We've seen this concept work countless times in popular media, from Harry Potter's 4 houses to Divergent's 5 factions. Each of these groups in Avatar is known for controlling, or bending, a certain element. The culture of each group is based on their respective element. For example, the Earth Kingdom is all about strength and determination, while the Air Nomads delight in freedom and enlightenment. The Earthbenders have rocks for brains while the Airbenders are airheads. I'm sure you get the picture. We've seen how strong this setup is in providing storytelling opportunities. Harry Potter is the highest-selling book series of all time for Cabbage's sake.
Oh, my cabbages!
So the four nations basically build their own characters. It's a great starting point. On top of the world building, the main plot follows the Avatar, an almost biblical character meant to bridge the four vastly different nations. Layer on the genocide committed by the Fire Nation, the heavy themes around Aang's disappearance, government conspiracy in the second season. I'm telling you, the show does not stray away from dark topics. Yet it was a kids' show on Nickelodeon. And that, in my opinion, is its greatest strength. The lessons that this show teaches kids throughout its 3 seasons. Let's take a look at Sokka's character arc. In the very first scene, he says,
I knew I should have left you home. Leave it to a girl to screw things up.
Then again, in episode 4, his misogyny takes center stage.
Wait a second, there's no way a bunch of girls took us down.
But what's this? The pompous cis male gets absolutely schooled by the powerful no-bullshit Kyoshi warriors? And Sokka, humbled by his own ass-kicking, accepts that he has a lot to learn from these warriors, regardless of their gender. This is a lesson Sokka has to learn over and over throughout the show, but one that by the very end, he has truly grown out of. What did this tell the 6-year-olds watching at home back in 2005? Think back. This was before gay marriage was federally legal in the US, before #MeToo and a lot of other progressive movements. Back then, your standard kids cartoon did not typically cover topics that Avatar does. Toxic masculinity is not the only lesson in Avatar. Characters are repeatedly punished for taking things on alone, showing that it's okay to ask for help from others. There are powerful benders and characters of both genders, from the initially sexist Master Pakku to the schizophrenic Azula. The plot shows faults exist in everyone, the good and the bad, men and women, adult and child. The series finale, however, leaves the largest moral impact. If it wasn't obvious, spoilers ahead. So for 3 seasons, we've been told Aang has to
face the Fire Lord.
It's imprinted on us as Americans from a young age that fighting people is okay, and that war and manslaughter are common things. This may be ingrained in human nature, maybe, but even still, Aang decides to choose a different path. On paper, Aang is a flat character. He's Steve Rogers, he's Spider-Man noir. Put simply, he's out of his element. Literally, he is the only surviving bender of the air nomads. He's excitable and evasive in the beginning of the show, and is much the same at the end. But his commitment to himself, to listening to his own heart above all else, speaks loudest in the series finale. It's not his sparing of the Fire Lord that I find most meaningful, no. It is his approach to the battle that I find most moving. Everyone around Aang is telling him this is what he must do. From his friends, even to his past lives, it is expected that he set aside his own morals for the sake of the world. That is the job of an avatar. This is a message we hear a lot. Do your job, don't ask questions, be part of a society. Here in the United States, we are much more individualistic, but it's still not normal to take the approach Aang did. He took the advice of his ancestors, listened to what his friends had to say, and still managed to find another way. He stood out from a wave of people crying for this warlord's head. His actions set him apart from the rest of the world, completed the task at hand, and still remained true to his morals. Listen to your heart is cheap advice. It's so broad that it doesn't actually mean much. But in practice, such as in the series finale, it can be a powerful lesson. What are we teaching our children by showing Aang's journey? We are saying that you do not need to listen to the rest of the world, that violence is not the answer, and to let your morals guide you. It's not a complicated arc, it's not hard to explain Aang's anti-violent nature. His fighting style is 90% running away. But the inclusion of a non-violent protagonist is so impactful to the overall moral statement of the Avatar. Speaking of the Avatar, it's their job to unite the 4 divided nations. Aang finds himself in an incredibly divided world. The Fire Nation, properly symbolic of the modern West, is conquering the rest of the world, which they view as inferior. As Americans, this introduction is very reminiscent of our colonial roots. But the finale of the show is more evocative of modern times, specifically our current political climate. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living through history. 2020 has housed a lot: a civil rights movement, a pandemic, a failed impeachment, and so much more. But as Americans, we still have a lot to go through. A presidential election that either way will result in the demise of American democracy. At least that's what it looks like on social media. Both candidates are running primarily off their hate of the other. Why should we elect Biden? Because Trump is destroying our foreign relations and supports racist and xenophobic leadership. Why should we elect Trump? Because Democrats are going to let protesters and counter-protesters burn down the country one city at a time. We live in a political climate motivated by hate for the enemy, not love for our neighbor. Whichever way the election ends, millions of Americans are going to be furious. There's no winning. And in the midst of all this chaos and social distancing, a little kid's cartoon gets put on Netflix. Is this direct social commentary or just cheap entertainment? Certainly not direct commentary. The show was made over a decade ago. But I do believe Avatar: The Last Airbender is so popular in 2020 because it spreads a message that needs to be heard. There are better ways to do this. Do you know how many times they talk about Zuko carving his own path or Aang doing what others cannot? You do not have to listen to your friends, the news, or anyone. You are free to make your own decisions. And for the love of all things fair and just, please make these decisions. If we stay pinholed into minutiae debates between a deplorable candidate and a lackluster one, we will never get anywhere. Change happens in scale. Small actions compile into larger movements which continue growing up and up until the world could not possibly ignore them. If you do not like what the world looks like around you, do not sit passively by. Do something about it on a local level, even within your own home.
You must be decisive.
Right now, I'm 19 years old. It feels like the decisions I make now are some of the most impactful of my entire life. But it's not just my life, it's the world. The things I do today, the dreams I pursue, and the content I share, it has an effect. It is small, but our actions have consequences. They ripple out from the present and become waves in the future. I aim to water bend those waves into massive hurricanes of love and peace.
You're on your own!
Okay, I'm sorry, but I had to tie it back. But seriously, now is the time to sit and think about your own values. What do you see in this world? What is the world telling you to do? What do you want to do? Try to answer these questions for yourself, not for anyone else. What do you want to see in the world? And while you're thinking about all these things, consider this. If he were here, what would Uncle Iroh say? Hey, I want to thank you for watching this video essay. If you're new to this channel, what's up? My name is Cassidy. I like to make weekly videos about self-improvement, but I'm also a huge nerd and like to experiment trying different kinds of videos like this one. If you enjoyed this kind of content, please let me know by subscribing and tell me down in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. It's really cool to see people take the time and watch the videos I create, so thank you for that. Alright, I gotta go finish this edit. Bye guys.